Hey there, this is Jason Dunne with Sumo Logic, and I'm going to kick off today's session around cloud security monitoring and analytics with Sumo Logic. I'll spend a little bit of time just with the slides to start, and then we'll kind of dive straight into what I always consider to be the fun part, which is the demo itself, and we'll actually get live within the platform and kind of walk you through some um, common use cases, as well as a couple of interesting edge cases as they come down the line. So as we think about the larger kind of Sumo Logic security solutions product portfolio, we're really, for today's session, we'll really be focused around the continuous intelligence platform and the security use cases that align with that. So really around cloud security monitoring and analytics and thinking through monitoring, detecting, searching, investigating security incidents as they occur, and really considering what all the threat benchmarking and analytics components are to the process by which you would come through finding that information and really being able to drill down to the right details. In next week's session, same time, I will focus in on audit and compliance and really around improving compliance and posture management. Future sessions this week and in future weeks will also focus around our Cloud SIM product, which is really around automatically triaging alerts and detecting threats, being able to perform threat hunting investigations in a more kind of considered way with clearer processes and workflows around that, as well as Cloud SOAR, which really is focused around improving your security operations efficiency with progressive automation, orchestration, and really decision-making that comes along with that through the process. So a couple of common considerations that we hear from customers is really around, these are kind of some of the core challenges that we help to solve via security analytics, or really around the ability for Sumo Logic to not only itself be built as a cloud native platform, because we're able to very much scale up based on what our customer demands are, our customer scaling requirements are, but additionally, really being able to focus and key in on what the right data sources are that you want to be able to bring in, whether that is cloud or even on-prem as well. But because of the fact that Sumo itself is built on AWS from the start, we're able to really scale up quickly and navigate help you navigate the right sort of monitoring requirements. We'll get into some of the details around kind of the product architecture and what that actually looks like in a more tactical or tangible way, but I just want to start with that kind of opening point. And then really the increased visibility that comes alongside that, right? We have many customers that maybe are making a shift from on-prem into more cloud data, or maybe are just have always been built in the cloud, just like Sumo Logic is. This really allows you to have that increased visibility to navigate, better understand what is occurring within your system, be able to both monitor and analyze. We'll talk a little bit about some of the differences and parallels between monitoring and analysis, but I just want to start with that kind of initial point. And then we'll also, I want to key in on the fact that Sumo Logic really offers a ton of out-of-the-box content, some of which we'll look at live on the platform today. And those analytics capabilities really are very unique to Sumo Logic, because oftentimes you'll see with our competitors that you'll be able to build something purely on an open source platform, and that gives you a lot of flexibility. But then if you really want to drill down and have very, very specific security use cases, you're kind of left to tune that for yourself and do your own homework at home, but not necessarily be able to have something ready to go right out the gates. So this is a little bit of a look at kind of more like sort of the process elements of how we actually help security engineering teams to really improve how they approach security monitoring generally as a concept. And part of that is really going to come down to firstly the collection. So being able to really ingest the most critical cloud or on-premise data. And then the analysis process of really being able to analyze, get really specific with the security focused analysis using parse, format, merge, time slice, these many different types of operators, all of which is available within our technical content online to be able to really drill in on and better understand how you can set up the right queries for what your needs are. And then being able to alert, you really can save down all of those same queries that underpin the analysis, and really be able to alert against that and set up what the right thresholds are so that you are receiving alerts at the right time in order to actually tune in to what the best sort of like outlier detection, et cetera, is that would indicate what is actually occurring within your system. And then visualization as well. So we'll spend a lot of time on some dashboards that help to really cement, I think, what the kind of visuals are that are attached back to that. But as we think about kind of the larger product architecture and how we manage ingestion of data sources, this can be, we'll get into some specific data sources in the scope of the actual demo itself, but this can be inclusive of apps that you're building, external products that you're building for your customers, and then SaaS IT, which refers here to, maybe Zoom or Zscaler data that, or Slack data, for example, that you want to be able to manage and understand in terms of the internal corporate IT that you're better navigating. Multi-cloud and on-premise both would be your own infrastructure that you're managing for your team or for your customers. All of these many types of data sources can then be ingested into the platform for both security monitoring and security analytics. This is we'll spend some time at looking at what those dashboards actually, how those are actually constituted. But I think as we think about the security monitoring piece, it's really around having that larger, broader view of being able to surface those critical security issues, have that kind of overarching bird's eye view of what's happening in terms of all of these different types of infrastructural elements. And then security analytics is really getting into the use case specific piece of the puzzle of saying, okay, this is where the queries kind of bring me in the right direction. We might even get down to kind of the raw message level, and then back out of that again in terms of being able to build out the right security monitoring dashboards. So we'll get into the details in the actual demo itself. But as we think about the granularity that you're able to achieve, you can actually then pivot out at the device level, IP level, network and database level, and really be able to key in on at the right sort of level of granularity in order to perform that analysis. So this is the continuous intelligence platform, which the cloud security monitoring and analytics solution is built upon. It really allows you to generate those actionable security insights, prioritize threats, perform deeper investigations. As we think about prioritizing threats, it's really about taking that security overview or security monitoring lens, and then really being able to surface all those most critical insights. As you go deeper into investigation on the security analytics side, you're really able to explore and detect, find these detected insights and leverage Sumo Logic's native query language and all of the many operators that I kind of touched upon at the beginning in order to build out these really granular approaches. Response, we maybe think of more as part of the kind of larger SOAR conversation, but in reality, you can absolutely perform response tactics within the continuous intelligence platform. You can, for example, receive an alert within Slack or Microsoft Teams that can indicate to you that something has fallen outside the expected range. And then you can actually perform quarantining of hosts from within Slack or within Microsoft Teams itself. So you do have the option to not just focus on kind of the detection or investigation, more the front end. You can actually go a little bit deeper and straight all the way through into the response mechanisms as well. So as we think about the next stage of the process here, and as we think about prioritization of threats, deeper investigation, even some of the response, which we won't touch on as much within the demo itself, I think this is a great opportunity to kind of dig into. Also, if you want to spend time just with the resources yourself and kind of follow along at home, then I'll pop this into the comment section. Now you should have access to security analytics overview, demo video and run through, which is kind of a condensed version of today's session, security solutions brief, as well as kind of the Sumo Dojo Slack, which allows you to actually look at some core use cases that maybe other customers are experiencing alongside, and kind of drill in and better understand that through kind of shared use cases or similar use cases that other customers may be experiencing or prospects people that are just getting to know the Sumo Logic platform itself. So with today's session, I'm going to really focus around, now that we're live within the platform, I'll start with kind of security monitoring, taking the broader view, and then I'll kind of drill into security analytics as a core use case. So one of the ways in which I'll do that is we'll kind of look at Linux data specifically, and here we're going to just start with these kind of spark lines, which are just showing the kind of trend lines. Here we're not seeing any really significant movement, but that's a good thing, right? We don't want to see anything too far outside the lines of expected behavior. As we kind of drill into each of these, we're seeing kind of these various ratios popping up in terms of successful versus failed logins. We see a typical ratio, which in this case is really showing us kind of a little bit outside the expected range. We're seeing kind of a larger number of failed logins than we typically would expect to see, especially when we get into the root login successes versus failures. We wouldn't typically see this many failures. So, this could be as simple as just kind of a failed cron job or something that's more automated or more process driven in the back end. But it might be something that is worth drilling into as we consider the fact that these failed logins are clearly a much higher ratio than we typically would see, of kind of that 1-to-2 ratio, just roughly speaking, just by looking at it here. We also see, accounts deleted versus created. So we'll get into some of those details as we progress. But I think, again, if this is in line with kind of how your account provisioning and onboarding and offboarding is set up, then this may not be of a vast concern here. But at the same time, this is a kind of atypical number that we wouldn't expect to see. So as we kind of consider that, it may be something you want to drill into and better consider. Total services we'll get into as well. So this is just kind of that starting point, gives you that overview of what all is going on within your system. As we kind of progress through, we can then see user service and system monitoring, and we can start to look at the actual service level and consider what the actual services are that we're pivoting out on. I'm going to hide the filter for now. We'll come back to the variables that can be of consideration here. But as we kind of sift through and we see these various services that are occurring, we see SSHD, we see daemon, we see network manager. So just all of the many services that come into play. And, we might consider, okay, well, in this particular instance, for example, DH client or user add or as expected, but then maybe smart D or shadow are various services that we're not expecting to see. So we may just want to better understand for each of these, set up filters accordingly and better navigate what the various types of destination hosts that are actually driving some of this. We can also key in on an individual destination host. So we could say, for example, if we just focus in on a specific destination host, like in this case, we're looking at Bruno-supercomputer. And this is telling us that we're actually seeing SSHD is still one of the main drivers. User add will look familiar to us as well, smart D. But then as we start going deeper, we may see that maybe collection processes or pulse audio, for example, are showing higher instances. This may be in line with what the expected behavior is for this particular entity or destination host in this particular case, or it may fall outside the expected range, and that might be something that we want to sort of follow up on. We also see the event count that we drill down on for each of these, but just kind of one area of focus or one area of consideration. And then as we jump ahead and we think about kind of privileged activity, which is where it gets really interesting, right? Because then we're starting to look at a couple different things come to mind. So firstly, sudo attempt indicates to us that this is a much higher threshold or let's just say much higher privileged activity, higher escalation of type of access to resources. And as we expect, we actually do see a pretty low number of failures versus a very high number of attempts. But we do also see some spiking in activity of, something that falls just outside the expected range, such as event count here, being in the 10 range, but even some much higher level of activity with the actual attempts. So we probably are less interested in the low range here because that's just indicating a drop off in activity. Maybe it's as simple as just showing us what time lunchtime was, but in this case, we actually see on the other side, we're much more interested in the high range here. So we see where it's falling outside the expected range. And if we actually go to open this up in search, and we look at this a little bit more closely, we can actually tune the threshold. And you can see now the way that this query is set up is we're actually parsing out via regular expressions what we're most interested in. We're extracting, we're parsing, and we're saying every time where source user matches a given asterisk, and we can set all the right variables up for that within the dashboard if we want to actually get more granular. The time slice allows you to adjust these things, and the outlier thresholds can also be adjusted. But this is where it's also really helpful, because if we save this down and we go to schedule this search, let's say in real time, I can actually say every time the results are greater than, than 10 in a given range, and then I can actually set up webhooks into, for example, your Slack or Microsoft Teams instance, or we can just set it as an email. But you can see where this actually allows us to actually, not only get granular and specific with how we navigate and understand where these kind of outliers are occurring, but also we can see where the messages are, what specific messages, and even look at some of the formatting of the messaging so we understand what's actually driving some of these fields that are most relevant for this particular use case. So this is a little bit of a lens into privilege activity within Linux data. We have all the same ability to set the template variables up that can actually help us to set filters and better understand what the destination hosts are and actually navigate that way. And then we can also look at login activity, right? So the privilege access, in this case, privilege activity was very specific to sudo attempts. And that's where we're interested, because we know that we have access to very relevant data that is also of deeper consideration from a security perspective. But we can also back out here, and we can say, okay, what does it look like for login activity for security analytics? And we're looking at actually excessively failed access attempts, and we're just looking at much higher volume activity, so we can get kind of these broader trend lines. And we can see, okay, well, what is as we expect, we see more activity for just generalized user login versus root user login. Then we only see this one outlier for event count kind of crossing the threshold on May 16th around the 23 hour mark. And that's where we can kind of better understand and even just go back and do our own homework with either our DevOps team or a SOC team or security engineering efforts around, does this map to expected behavior in terms of just seeing spikes in overall activity? And how does that align back with what we expect to see? And is this an area of consideration for something that does require kind of deeper investigation, et cetera? So this is a really quick whirlwind tour of what it looks like to look at Linux security monitoring data, all the way down to security analytics data, and really getting into the visualizations that actually drive these. As we consider what's available in terms of kind of cloud security monitoring and analytics, we now have a number of options within within the app catalog in terms of security hub data, Palo Alto firewall, Windows 1Password as well is certainly an option. All of these different types of visualization actually show us what it looks like in terms of what the various options are and what you'll actually be able to get off to the races off quickly with. So when we look at security, and then we look at WAF data for AWS, the ability to add that integration really quickly, assign the right source category. We can even just add WAF here, or just search for the right source category. We can see Barracuda versus AWS. Clearly, we want to focus on AWS since that's what it's built around. You kind of progress through the configuration and get everything set up that way. You also have the ability to tune the collection process, adjust whether you can go with installed versus hosted collectors depending on the use cases, but you just have a lot of different options from that perspective. And then there's also the whole sort of larger bucket of compliance and security data that comes into play. And whether it's Cisco data, Akamai data, and you can tune whether it's, you may already be bringing in Akamai data for DevOps use cases, but what does it look like to tune that more for security, for example, and build accordingly. So just a couple of different options for you as far as how you can navigate through the app catalog and how you actually utilize the continuous intelligence platform. So forgot to mention this at the top of the session. Well, a couple things. So firstly, my name is Jason Dunne. I'm a product marketing manager here at Sumo Logic on the security team. So feel free to ask any questions. I meant to mention that sort of the top of the hour. Feel free to ask any questions that you do have at this stage, or really could have been at any point in the session, but hopefully you felt empowered to be able to just chime in and ask whatever comes to mind. You're also welcome to reach out to us at, let's see if I think I have it on the slide here. You're welcome to reach out to us at sales@sumologic.com. I'll pop that into the chat as well. And we'll be able to connect the dots for you in terms of who the right person is to be able to progress and make sure that we understand what the core use cases are that you're really looking to solve from a security engineering perspective, security operations perspective, DevOps as well, if you're kind of more of a shared model within your organization. We work with a really wide range of customers, from startups all the way up to very large enterprises. If you're feeling like you want to just get started with a free trial and just get live within the platform, which we demoed today, you can sign up for that at sumologic.com/sign-up. We typically have that set up as a 2-week trial, but we can absolutely work with you if you have a different timeline in mind as you're kind of thinking about what the right value is to you, to your organization, and which aspects of the product you actually want to navigate and better understand with the feature set and align that back to what you're actually looking to solve. So with all that, I'm going to actually go on mute for the next couple minutes here, just in case there are any final questions that occur to you as you're kind of just marinating on all this information. I know I just threw a lot at you, so I want to make sure that there's time for questions here at the end. Thanks so much for joining. It looks like we have, thanks so much, Jonathan, for joining as well. And I'll go ahead and go on mute. If there are any last questions, feel free to chime in the Q&A or chat, and we'll make sure that we get those answered. Thanks again for joining me today.